Thanks for joining us on this episode of Moroso Television. Moroso is very proud to show you our brand new digital tire pressure gauge. It'll keep you in the winner's circle for many years to come, and using this cost-effective yet highly accurate gauge, we feel that with the options it offers you to tailor it exactly the way you want your tire pressure gauge to read, by far it's the best product on the market. And this video here is to show you the 5 different settings that you can put into this gauge head to make it exactly the way you want it to be. Gone are the days of the simple dial gauges. Now, a lot like your cell phone, we've gone into many different add-on values, many different settings, but at the end of the day, this gauge is going to give you exactly what you want. And as with any Moroso product, it's dependable and it's going to last you many, many years. So take the gauge out of the package, hold down the on button for about 2 seconds. When you release it, you're going to see that it shows 15, which means it's a 0 to 15 PSI gauge head. Moroso also offers these gauges in 0 to 60 and 0 to 100 options. On the right side, you're going to see we have full battery power. And on the bottom left, you're going to see we're in the pounds per square inch reading. So follow us now over this video, and we're going to show you the 5 different settings that you'll be able to make this gauge customized exactly the way that you want it to be and make it as accurate as you require it to be. Let's begin setting the parameters on our Moroso tire pressure gauge. Each gauge gives you 5 different options of different parameters you can set based on how you want to read your tire pressure. To go to the menu, we're going to hold down the 0 button, and in this case go to menu number 1. When we see 1 come up on the screen, release the 0 button. First menu option gives us either a hold or continuous mode. By pushing down the 0 and we see hold, we are now going to have our first option. What the hold option does is when you go to check your tire pressure and put the valve down on the stem and get our reading, when you release it off the valve stem, it'll give you and remain with the highest reading that it saw. The disadvantage to this is we're unable to bleed any pressure down and see a new value. You'd have to re-zero it out. So we're going to go back to menu option number 1. And we're going to select the continuous mode. The continuous mode is going to act a lot more like a mechanical gauge would. So when we go to check our tire pressure, we will get our reading, and when we release it off the valve stem, it'll go back to 0. Now when we go to check it and we bleed it down, the reading on the gauge will respond to the changes as we bleed it down. So this is option number 1 on the Moroso tire pressure gauge. Menu option number 2 on the Moroso tire pressure gauge allows us to either manually turn it on and off, or when we turn it on, it'll set a parameter timeout when it shuts off. So what we're able to do is go to our 0, select menu option number 2, and it's either going to give us an option for automatic on or automatic off. Well, in this case, we're going to go to automatic off, and you can see already it says 60 seconds. We can actually increase that time by pushing the 0 button and increasing it to, let's just say, 3 minutes. So by leaving it, it'll go to that set default and shut off after 3 minutes from the last time it takes a reading. Well, let's say you go back and say, you know what, we're killing the battery on this thing, let's drop this thing down to shut off after 1 minute. Once we zero the gauge out, we can actually go back in, go back to menu option number 2. And we can decrease the value by, again, selecting automatic off. And now by holding down the 0 button, we actually go back to the beginning, and we can leave it and set it for 1 minute now. And when you leave it, it'll default back to that value. And now this thing will shut off after 1 minute from the last time it takes a reading, thus increasing battery life. Option number 3 on the Moroso tire pressure gauge allows us to set the units of measurement that we'd like to measure the tire pressure with. Typically, PSI is where it's going to be, but this does give us other options. So we go to menu option number 3, we have PSI, bars, kilogram force per cubic centimeter in kilopascals. So once you find the setting that you would like, and in this case PSI, we'll hold down the 0 button and it'll blink and choose which unit of measurement that the tire pressure gauge will now read in. And this setting will always be on the face of the gauge. Option number 4, the Moroso tire pressure gauge, is probably one of the best aspects of this gauge. What we're able to do is actually determine what value we want our tire pressure to be read at. And what we're going to do is go to menu number 4. Typically with mechanical gauges, you can read in either quarter or tenth of a pound increments, but you have to visually see it. With a Moroso tire pressure gauge, we actually have the option to have settings vary between tenths of a PSI, half a tenth of a PSI, every 200ths or every 100th of a PSI. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait for this to come back around to our tenths of a PSI. By pushing 0 and selecting tenths of a PSI, we are now able to go and check our pressure, and it'll be very common to what a mechanical gauge would be. In this case, 6.3, 6.2, 6.3. And as you can see, we're just dealing in tenth of a PSI increments. Now we're going to go back to menu option number 4. And what's becoming more of a standard nowadays with race cars is wanting to read in actually half a tenth increments. So we're going to come over here and wait till we get our half a tenth increment option, push 0 down. And now when we go to check our tire pressure, we'll be able to go with in between that tenth of a PSI increment. Now in some cases, people may actually want it to be an even smaller increment. And what we're going to do for this demonstration is we'll go back to menu option number 4 and we'll actually select every 100th of a PSI. By selecting this, what we're going to see is going to give us a lot more accuracy on the reading, but we're also going to see the values jump around substantially more. Because it's such a small change in PSI, anything could upset and change the value that we're seeing on this. So you got to keep that in mind when you're looking for values this small. On the next menu option, we're actually going to be able to dictate how fast that reading is displayed on the gauge, which may make some of these higher accuracy readings a little bit easier to look at and understand what number you're trying to shoot for. Menu option number 5, and the final one on the Moroso tire pressure gauge, will determine the speed at which the value will display on the gauge face. So we're going to go to menu number 5, and what we've done is from the previous number 4 menu, we kept this at 100ths of a PSI increment to show you just how we can change the speed of the reading. It gives you 5 different readings, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to one end of the spectrum to the other and go to reading number 1. This will show us is the speed at which we're going to take this pressure is very fast, and you can see how fast it moves around. Or if we go back to menu number 5, we're actually going to go to speed number 5, which will substantially slow it down, but in hundredths of an increments will still move around quite a bit. Option number 5. And now we'll take our reading, and what you'll see is a lot slower reading time, which will make it a lot easier to determine exactly what reading you are getting from your tire. This makes a bigger difference in the tenths and half a tenth PSI readings, that the speed will definitely make a bigger difference on how quick that number value changes on you while in the staging lanes. So these are the 5 menu options on the Moroso tire pressure gauge. And again, we feel this is the best value for the most accurate gauge on the market. And you've got plenty of options to tailor this exactly the way you want it. If you have any questions, please go to Moroso.com or call the Moroso Tech Department where we can help you at any time. And thank you for watching this episode of Moroso Television.